Due to a recent commitment in your area, Luke and Jimmy suggest you seek shelter and also turn on Locked On Bama.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode, well, it's not brought to you by anybody just yet. This is an emergency podcast, baby. And this is for Keelon Russell, who really took a lot of the suspense out of the when's he going to commit thing when he committed this afternoon.
Yeah, Luke and I have noted going into last weekend that he was atop the quarterback board, that it was a big trip, that not only would Alabama try to convince Keelon Russell to flip his commitment from SMU to Alabama, but also to cancel his remaining visits. Consider all of it a huge success. This is one of the big wins of the early Kalen DeBoer recruiting efforts. This is his first quarterback. It's a national elite quarterback. I'd like to, point out he is a consensus top 8 quarterback. In other words, from the 4 major services, no one has him ranked lower than 8th in the country. He's also earned an invitation to the Elite 11 finals, which is, kind of shakes up those quarterback rankings. That's an excellent side-by-side look at all of the quarterbacks together. It tends to kind of move those rankings around a little bit. So let's see if Keelon moves up or down, but I would say up is very possible. He's been moving up for weeks and months. Some people will say, oh, well, he flipped from SMU. Well, he also was heavily recruited by Florida, Oregon, Ole Miss. He got offered by Texas, even though they already had KJ Lacey committed. And Texas bought him in for an unofficial. He looked around, but they already have KJ Lacey. Texas A&M offered, Virginia Tech offered. This is not just an SMU commitment. This is a heavily recruited national top 8 quarterback, and from what I hear, I'm looking forward to interviews that I get to see and hear. I hear great things about his personality, and of course, he's the quarterback of an extremely prominent program in the state of Texas.
Yeah, and a lot of people already know this, but he is the quarterback for Decorian Moore. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah,
but
I said Decorian Joyner the other day. Wasn't that a kid that played for South Carolina?
Maybe. Or maybe you're just thinking of Harold Joyner and Decorian Moore. You could have said Harold Moore. So, by the way, Herman Moore was on that college football getting in the Hall of Fame list I told you about the other day, or at least being voted on. Herman Moore, I'll never forget this. This has nothing to do with Keelon Russell, but I remember my dad was betting on football way back when I was in high school, and I had some friends with me. He said, Luke, I don't know who to take in this Virginia game. And I said, well, I like Virginia. I mean, they got the Sean Moore to Herman Moore connection, the Moore to Moore connection. I love those two guys. He goes, why am I sending you to private school again? Because you should know that type of stuff. Knowing physics and things. And I was like, no, I don't know any of that. Anyway, so look, as far as the SMU thing, is so funny. Like the same people who will poo-poo the idea that he was once committed to SMU, like will also be the guys that on the other side, if SMU gets a guy that Alabama would, they offered, but he didn't have an offer he could commit, they'll use that and say, he could have gone to Alabama. No, he couldn't. See, the recruiting is this amalgam of junk, and you have to read through all the lines.
To read through lines. You have to read between the lines a lot of times.
And, so you can't just say, when you look on the where a guy has an offer from, if it says he has an offer from Alabama and Auburn and LSU and Ohio State, okay, that's what officially he does. But it would be better if they have a column that says this guy can actually commit to Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and Ohio State. Because if he can't commit to those places, the offer is no good. I mean, if Jennifer Aniston calls me up and says, Luke, I'd like for you to take me out on a date, and I go, really? And she goes, not really, and then hangs up, that screws my day up. I didn't have a date with Jennifer Aniston.
Though I would call it a date offer. I would call it that. I mean, you got it at that point.
Believe me, it would be on,
it would be
I
on
would
your
use
profile.
it just like the SMU people would use a guy who had an offer from Alabama. I would use
exactly.
But and let's also say
on your profile.
Let's also say this. 10 years ago, if Alabama took a guy that was committed to SMU, I think even you and I, being seasoned veterans when it comes to the recruiting game, may panic. SMU is now in the ACC, folks, and they've got Dallas money, and the kid's from Dallas. So it's kind of like he was like, okay, I don't know that I'm getting any other offers, and I'm going to go ahead and take this one. And he was young. He's been committed to him for a while. I don't know if it's a year, but it's a long time. And so everybody knew he wasn't going to be committed to him from long. But why should he publicly decommit when, frankly, Keelon has been doing SMU a favor because he was in SMU commitment Keelon Russell. And so SMU is getting some more press from a dude that's one of the top quarterbacks in the country. I'm saying this worked out well for everybody. Keelon gets to –
I doubt SMU feels that way.
Okay. They
just
don't.
like Jennifer Aniston's current boyfriend would be so upset about her asking you out, even though she hung up on you.
What is the Locked On Bama guy, Jen?
Sounds
the
like
Locked On Bama guy? Not even the good Locked On Bama guy.
That whole thing sounds like an episode of Catfish on MTV for some reason.
Oh, for me, it'd be something like Big Mouth Bass or Carp or, crappie fished. Something crappy like that. Anyway, so.
Yeah, Keelon. How about the fact that Charles Power, who I've been comparing him to, Jaden Daniels, and Charles Power, the rankings expert at On3, who's just one of the very best in the business, and his comp to Keelon Russell that's available on BOL. He says Jaden Daniels. So I'm not the only one that sees that. I went back and looked just briefly right after Keelon officially committed at Jaden Daniels' junior tape, his junior huddle, and he was listed out on his junior huddle tape, 6'3", 185. I think it's exactly what Keelon Russell is listed at, 6'3", 185. And, of course, I think watching Jaden Daniels' junior highlight tape again, exactly as I said before, Jaden is a little faster and a little more elusive, but Keelon's a little better throwing the football at the same age. Keelon's a better, more polished passer at the same stage. Now, we all know what polished passer Jaden Daniels would become eventually, and we're hoping as Alabama fans that Keelon Russell follows the same developmental track and gets better and better and better and better, just as Daniels did in his six whopping years in college. Keelon's not going to be in college for 6 years. He won't have the benefit of that COVID business, but Keelon is a guy that I think will be the type that gets better and better and better. He's going in a good situation, Alabama. Luke, me and you have talked about this on the last couple of shows about what do you call it? The line of succession. I mean, who's going to be the quarterback after Milroe? Who's going to be the quarterback after Ty Simpson? Keelon Russell may not look at it this way, but I think a great situation is when you go to a place where all you got to focus on is your development. Because the idea that you're getting on the field quickly probably isn't going to happen. But that's a good thing. Now, not all these kids see it that way. It's just us older adults that have been around the block a few times see it that way. But, I mean, we got to remember that it's developmental. It's big, even at the NFL level. You know who recently sat out their first year and didn't play? Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback on the planet Earth. Even he didn't play year one in the NFL. He had to sit.
Well, I do need to tell everybody about FanDuel. This is an emergency pod, but this is also an emergency. There are a lot of games going on. Look, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, well, you already know, is America's number one sportsbook. All right, so I think the obvious question, Jimmy, is now that Keelon's in the boat, and Alabama is certainly recruiting a lot of other wide receivers, but I don't know if it was Bone or Tim Watts, one of the two of them, very stealthily alluded to the possibility of maybe Decorian Moore visiting Alabama now. He was one time committed to LSU. He hadn't really been on Alabama's radar, or vice versa, or both. But now maybe things change a little bit. And Yeah, and so that could be cool. Here's another thing. I love to see fan reaction when we get a commitment this big. If it's going to be like a 4-star offensive lineman that we knew we were going to get from day one, I don't lose my mind as much. But when you talk about the quarterback for the class now, and this is universal for all schools, that's your figurehead. That's your CEO for the class. Now look, he may not be your best commitment, but that's the dude that, he's the headliner because he's the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. So I did not like the fact I went to BOL because y'all are my go-to. And there was somebody that started a thread was like, check out this SMU meltdown. I'm like, why do I want to choose? I'm not mad at SMU. And SMU actually, their meltdown wasn't bad at all.
Bad for them.
There was one.
Feel bad for SMU.
There was one dude that was like,
sort of bad.
Oh, what a jerk! He can blank off. Oh, okay, but that's just a weirdo for SMU. Most of them were like, yeah, we could kind of see this coming. Yeah, this was bound to happen. But they were like me. They were like, at least we're involved. SMU can't go from buying everybody Porsches to the death penalty to being back on the mainstream again immediately. Now, granted, it's been about 40 years. They do a lot of stuff.
They probably don't consider it immediately there. But yes.
Know, but they did have the death penalty, and they are finally getting back to where, hey, they're kind of relevant. Now, they're not hugely relevant, but they're in the Power 4 now, and that needs to be respected. And the idea that they can't ever recruit in Dallas again or Texas is nuts. So I'm not here to make this a locked on feel sorry for SMU. I'm just here to say we don't need to laugh at everybody every time we steal a commitment. If it were Auburn or Ohio State, let's have a laugh together. If it's SMU, let's go, hey guys, you'll get them next time.
Yeah, most people are too young listening on the podcast to remember this, but before SMU got the death penalty, they were stacking 5-stars like cordwood over there, which sort of led to the death penalty issues, but SMU, they're not new to recruiting at this level. It's just been a long while. I feel bad for SMU. To me, it's no different than the old days, pre-Nate Oates, Alabama basketball recruiting. And we sort of it looked like we were in good shape for a guy, and then in swoops Kentucky, and to steal him away. What were we going to say? Like, how dare you choose the nation's number one program over our never been to the Elite Eight but once program?
Not too terribly long ago. In my lifetime. Yeah. I'm going to give a shout out to Caleb King. You sort of jerk. You made up for it later. I'm just teasing. You're not a jerk. Says, hey, Luke, hate to tell you, but this is not our first listen of the day. Ha, ha, ha. I'm really happy we got Keelon. Hey, we're on the same team.
We're on the same late. Yeah, we're late in the day.
He does bring it. He says, I'm just playing with you. I appreciate what you bring to the channel. Thank you, Caleb. I was teasing with you too. See, that's what I love when we can rib each other like a bunch of Theta Chi's and 5 Gams and
banters. Hey, you mentioned Decorian Moore earlier and what Tim and Andrew Bone on BOL have alluded to. Yeah, it does look like Decorian Moore might now visit Alabama. I don't think we need to get too excited about this. I think it was kind of a situation where it's not like he wasn't aware of Alabama before, and it's not like we hadn't, been involved or tried to involve ourselves with him before and not getting much traction. Now he's going to visit us, but like Luke brought up the Jennifer Aniston thing, I think there's a lot like, Jennifer Aniston wasn't going to go over to Luke's house. She'd been invited, wasn't going to go, but her friend Monica is going. Monica's going over to Luke's, so she's like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna go with Monica."
Hey, I wouldn't turn down Ross. Let me tell you, I've learned at this age, I better take what I can get.
Talk about an emergency podcast.
Bryce Hollis says, I figured you guys forgotten how to actually go live.
That's a decent point.
It's not only a decent point, it's sort of true.
It's sort of technically true.
I did send Jimmy the wrong link to begin with. So you guys know us better than we know ourselves. Then I'll tell you a couple other things. Bama Bob says SMU was NIL when it wasn't cool. And I would say, yes, that's true. But NIL stood for now I'm loaded because I'm at SMU. And then 5 Adam. Should it be 5 Adams? Thanks for the show. Keelon on the same level as Juju. Okay. That's the next thing that's coming.
Great question.
It's
great point. Great
I
question.
don't think he's making it a question. I think he's making a definitive statement.
Yeah, he's making a statement. Is it true?
That's what I would ask you, because that's what's coming. Because should Juju Lewis commit to Auburn, which a lot of people believe he will. Now, his list is weird. His list is Auburn, Colorado, and USC. That is a bizarre list. None of those teams have really sniffed the playoffs. I mean, I guess USC has, but every time they got close, somebody beat them, like Utah or something. I mean, so it's a weird kind of list. And I think Juju's really good, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Jimmy. Juju is clearly rated higher by most services, if not all services. So I guess the answer is Juju is better. I'm going to tell you that I believe Keelon's going to get up high enough where there's going to be just a hair's difference, if there is one, either way.
I'm a fan of the rankings, and I pay a lot of attention to the rankings, particularly at On3, where I think we do it better than anybody does. So I'm a fan of the rankings, and I'll acknowledge Juju's ranked higher than Keelon, and we'll leave it at that. I'll also say this in terms of who's going to end up being the better player. Some of it is circumstance and program, who you're going to, who you're playing with, who you coach by. That matters. But I would tell anyone that's interested in looking at this, look at the quarterback rankings on the major services, and from just pick them out, 2016 to 2021, that's a 5 or 6 year period. Go back and look at the top 10, and you're probably going to find that the best quarterback that came out that year was in the top 10, but it might not have been the guy ranked number 1 or number 2. Maybe it's the guy ranked 4th or 7th or 5th. Maybe it was the guy ranked number 1. But I'm just saying, to me, it's more important that my Alabama guy, is in the top group. And Keelon is definitely in the top group. And anyone in the top group could prove to be the best player down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like any time in the NFL draft, there are usually 5 QBs drafted. Usually 4 of them are either just okay or stink, and one of them's really, really good. Now, occasionally there'll be 2 that are good, but it's hardly ever all of them. In fact, it's never all of them. Now, I want to end this on 3 comments, because this is an emergency podcast, not a full podcast. First of all, I'm going to say what 5 Adam says. Patrick Mahomes was a 3-star, and Aaron Rodgers was a 2-star. Sure. Don't fall in that trap. You can say that, and all those things are true, but don't fall in that trap. First of all, Keelon Russell is a high 4-star, probably ultimately going to be a 5-star. So we don't even use that argument. But I've always said, man, the diamond in the rough guys that, the old Tommy Tuberville finds a diamond in the rough in Louisiana, that's great. Tommy Tuberville never won a national championship. Nick Saban found 5 stars everywhere, used 5 stars everywhere, and we're the most dominant program for the last decade and a half. So I'm not getting on to you, 5 Adam. I just feel like I hate it when people say that, because if you look at recruiting rankings, they're pretty good predictors of who's going to be good and who's not.
I'll take the 5-star every single time over any other star. I'll always take the 5-star, because 5 stars have the best chance of developing into a real star player at the next level. 4 stars are next and 3 stars are next. But he does make one good point, is all these kids develop at different rates, and Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers both developed into what they became later. They were, you can call them late bloomers if you want. That's why Mahomes at Texas Tech, Aaron Rodgers was at Cal after going to junior college. Right. Josh Allen went to junior college and then to Wyoming. So these kids develop at different rates. Keelon Russell, I would say to some extent, is also a late bloomer, in the sense that he was one thing and committed to SMU. And then a year later, he's a completely different player. Now he's recruited by everybody. So he's a late bloomer too, though bloomed earlier than Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Now, we'll see as development keeps going. Jaden Daniels, who I've compared him to, Jaden Daniels only became the Jaden Daniels that won the Heisman Trophy in year 6. No one was predicting Jaden Daniels was going to one day win a Heisman Trophy in years 1, 2, 3, and 4 of his career in college. He just kept getting better and better, and then, boom, took a big step in his final year. And that's what development's all about. It's just different. Every kid has a different developmental track.
Now, Caleb King also comes back with, hey, I really thought it was a long shot to get Ty Haywood, but now I don't know, kind of like our chances. We talked about this, I think, 2 days ago, so go check out that podcast, or 2 podcasts ago, because this – anyway. And then let's see, there was – somebody else said, do we think we take a second QB in this cycle? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no, but Jimmy, you may have a different answer.
My answer is no, but what could happen in a compressed period of time is if we feel that a quarterback on the team may be entering the portal in December and signing days in December, maybe if you find out somebody's leaving. But if everything stays static, meaning, Milrow's still around, Simpson's still around, Lonergan's around, Max around, Keelon Russell's on the way, no, I don't believe there'd be a second quarterback. Things can change if the quarterback room changes.
All right, that's going to do it for this emergency podcast. We will be back tomorrow with an actual podcast. We'll probably talk some more Keelon Russell, so come on back, because we'll be back then. But when you get a
interesting player coming up on the roster rankings that everyone will want to hear about, I promise you that.
Oh, I'm just chomping at the bit. I already know the answer. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.